Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another live streaming episode of Alternative Money Monday. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I'm JR, co-founder of Ledgerama, the makers of Walla Wallet, the original, the trusted, and the safest mobile wallet in the Hedera ecosystem. As per usual, I'm joined by our community manager, Tim Mungai, my favorite influencer, Brandon the H-Bar Bull, and this week we're really pleased to be joined by Web23, Dell and Somm of the Web23 team. Dell and I go back a pretty good little ways here in the Hedera ecosystem. We've been buddies and chit-chatting for quite a while in the telegrams and all those kind of chat formats. So it's always a pleasure to talk to Dell. We really appreciate all the work you guys do. Really doing some cutting edge stuff and have been for quite a while. So we thank you for that. And just really good folks to boot. So thanks for joining us, guys.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here, Jeremy. And I really have to side note, you and Brandon and most of the community members are the very reasons why we're on this space. So yeah, happy to be here.
Right. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm also privileged to be here. Thanks for calling us. And it's really talking to Hedera community. And being Monday morning, we are going to open and unpack many new things for sure.
All right. Awesome.
Yeah.
Love to hear that. Very cool. So, this is kind of standard stuff that we'll start off with, but could you tell us how Web23 got started? And of course, why Hedera? I'm sure that most of the folks out there may be aware, but you can just kind of give us the quick version of why you picked Hedera, but more importantly, just tell us a little bit about Web2 and Web23 and how you got started.
Yeah.
Yes, Dell.
Okay, I'd like to give you a bit of history on our side on how we started. But we really went back all the way to Hedera 21. When we, when it caught my eye, I have another project on the side before, which is bits.com. I've been a heavy domainer, understanding, the new TLDs that came out and how to bring it over to the Web3, right? Because I understand when it was introduced to Hedera, the caption that went the trust layer of the internet. And that's when I hook up what I'm doing, which is with basically a retail domains, like a weekend.sale, say, for example. How can a weekend.sale domain be used in the Web3 environment? And that's when things got clear to me that, oh, wow, we are now going into the digital transformation of things. This is the digital twins, for that matter. Again, in the context of simple digital twins, wherein a physical object or an event can have a specific meaning in the digital world, into the metaverses that's going to come. So how are we going to bring these real life concepts into the digital world that people can understand? Because that's the only way we can do engagement, if people understand what they see. Because as human nature, we are, that's how we've been taught about, words. We understand it, pictures. And if you cannot relate to certain things in the digital world, how can we make engagement? We're just going to be playing games. We cannot do that. We are still bounded by the real world, what's happening in the real world. So if we can link these concepts, these real life concepts, objects, events, to have identities in the digital space, then we can engage them. And that's when we realize that domains or naming systems are critical in the in the context of things. So that's where we are. And then we had participated in Hedera 21. We have a very enjoyable experience on that. Then I get hold on to you. Then I get introduced to, because of Hedera 21, I get introduced to some folks in who's doing coupons, the coupon bureau, then so forth and so on. I got hooked up, and then I got finally hooked up to Somm, who immediately related to what I'm doing, and we hit it off. And now we're here.
That's really important to find somebody that you like working with. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So you mentioned top-level domains, TLDs, right? So you mentioned TLDs and top-level domains, and I know Tim had a couple questions about just domains and DNS in general. Tim, did you want to ask your questions?
Oh yeah, and just a side comment first. I love Dell's enthusiasm when he's speaking. You can even sense I can sense your passion from like 15,000 kilometers away.
Yeah.
So right. So to really understand where we're going, we have to understand where we're coming from and where we're at. And most people really have been using internet since like maybe 30 years ago. And the thing is, people really don't understand. Personally, I came to understand it, the concept. I think I understand it just the other day when I was doing some research about DNS, the domain naming service. And we were hoping you guys could really explain it in a very simple way where our audience can really get it, what DNS is in the traditional sense.
Okay, yeah. So the internet started, I think, 3 decades back, and we can all correlate to that. And when it started, the number of machines or the IP addresses which were used to connect over the web were very limited. Very few of research labs and universities and the government-funded institutes, they had this internet, probably with the ARPANET. So in the early days of the internet, the IP addresses or the machines which were connected to the net were limited, and people could reach out to each other by just, let's say, remembering the IP addresses, or it was more like an office kind of setup. We call it as a LAN, local area network, where large offices and buildings got connected with each other. But when the internet started growing and evolving, if you'd like to say, and making a great explosion, countries and cities and institutions and inter and cross Atlantic and everything got connected to net. People started using it. Mobile devices came in. I'm just fast forwarding it to next 20 years. Everybody now has internet connection, is always online, as you'd love to say. So obviously the IP addresses were required, and it increased to a tremendous level. So back then, when it started to explode, people realized that it would be very complex to remember the IP addresses just by the long numbers, because they were all 32-bit IP addresses. So rather than that, they came up with a kind of address book, if you would like to have an analogy. So let's say if you have an IP address within your network, or even with the global network, the IP address was named to john.com, for example, or just for the host name John within the LAN or within the WAN. So that's how machines reach to each other. And then the websites evolved and mail services evolved. So mail services were known as MX. Even today, we call them as mail exchanger or mail host or webmail, for example. And then the websites or the web servers, they also got names. So this is how DNS evolves. DNS is basically domain name service, which is kind of a mapping between the IP addresses and the host names to make it easier for all of us to understand, because we don't remember phone numbers, those long numbers. If you notice, we remember each other by names, John or maybe Dell. So that's how the DNS evolved. And fast forward to 30 years, I mean, DNS has helped us, especially the e-commerce, to reach to this level, because without this, we would have been just keeping a long diaries or kind of notebooks to remember each other's IP addresses. So that's a quick translation. That was a quick genius, a quick hack, whereby people started knowing and reaching out to each other using the host names and the computer's IP addresses. So basically, that's DNS. Yeah.
Wow, and I really pity Jeremy and the older generation, because if you guys had to remember a string of numbers in order to communicate with another computer, then you guys had it rough.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I was in telecommunications long before my involvement in the Web3 world, and there was definitely the convergence of the old school, the legacy. Dell, Dell comes from the legacy world. I mean, I know you've mentioned punch cards in the past. So yeah, we had punch cards, and I mean, yeah, it was a pretty elaborate system. The punch cards actually predated me a little bit, so. But I definitely got involved when it was the transition from analog, before voice over IP, before digital phone, before any of that stuff existed. So yeah, it was It was definitely, it was a little confusing at first. Things have gotten a lot easier, a lot simpler, but but then some other things have gotten more complicated. Yeah, go ahead, Brandon, what you got?
Yeah, so I'm just curious because Dell mentioned that they had some discussions with Coupon Bureau, and I could really see how smart domains could be used in that industry. Are there any collaborations, or do you see any potential collaborations between you and the Coupon Bureau?
Yes, we're definitely we're open to collaborations with them. We're going to try, of course. We have, but before going into deeper relationships, right? We have to set up our infrastructure first, and that's where we are now. We've done a lot of proof of concepts and which one would be the best way to do things, and we're almost there. So we're going to be reaching out again to folks like not even only just Coupon Bureau, but for the other into the Web2 world. Because again, one of the reasons why we got hold of Somm and really integrated ourselves together is when I asked Somm, what entity would you name this company that we're forming? And when he said Web23, that immediately gave me the understanding that I'm dealing with the right person. Because how can we bring in the Web3? There's complex concepts in there, wallets, chains, different chains, smart contracts. The Web2 world doesn't understand that because they're already ingrained so much on the centralized processing of doing things. They don't have, it's the trustless, permissionless. Those are the words that are so difficult to understand. And that's when I said, looking back into the tagline of Hedera, the trust layer of the internet, that's when I really feel that, wow, this is where what we lack in Web 2. And that's the part of it where these smart pages that we're going to be developing later, but part of the infrastructure buildup that we're doing is the next leg that we're going to be doing, and we're almost there. The infrastructure is there, and now we'll be working with the projects around in the community, because we believe as of now, they have their own individual projects, right? NFTs, they have their own team, they have their own style, they have their own project, they have their own art. But in reality, these are the components that's going to be built together in the metaverse that's going to come. Because each of these projects have their own identities. And it's really now a matter of converging them together, and now you can reference to them. And this is now the challenge is, of course, the UI, how it's going to be done. But we have tools now that are very wonderful. Unreal Engine, Unity, Spatial is coming in. Now, think about this now. Any object in the screen can be referenceable and engageable, which is now Web3 is needed. And that's why we cannot ignore the technology anymore, because the concepts of data ownership, data provenance, authenticity is all coming together. And you need decentralization, of course, because we need governance. Because in a decentralized world, anybody can do whatever they want. But we don't want that. We want an organized world. And how do we do that? That's why we have these DAO components, but the decentralized autonomous organizations, because that's how these communities or worlds gonna be governed by their very members. So these are all coming together. And that's why when we really understand and what they're trying to do and what all the projects out there, my God, we are in a great space. And
for sure.
And the very, very important in our space is the collaborativeness. Everyone is helping one another, and we have a great leader in the Dr. Baird and Mans. They are simple words that they use. What is it? Shared worlds. What is shared worlds? That's communities. You're creating your own space, creating your own product that interact with the community again. So this is the metaverse that's gonna come. So it's clear in our heads. We're in the right spot.
No, absolutely, and it's so funny because Dell just came out, of course, as one of the Hedera governing council members, and if you go and watch their clip on Alvarium, they talk about the exact same things that Lehman Baird talks about shared fabrics and
Yes.
building trust and how you can carve your own part of their fabric out, but all those things. But the infrastructure that you are building, that Walla Wallet provides, that Blade Labs provides, and LedgerWorks, it brings these Web 2 companies that have already established themselves and gives them the tools to easily move over into our space. And it was funny because I just talked to LG Art Labs, and it's interesting how that all works together. Now that team, you think of them as one of these big Web 2 companies, one of these big Fortune whatever companies, but LG Art Labs is really like a startup within that. They believe in the concept of Web3. They're a small team, but it hasn't been completely sold to everybody in the organization. So just like we need to support teams like yours and Ledgerama and everybody else, we need to support those small teams as well, because once they prove out their small little ecosystem, then the rest of the LG organization is like, hey, hold on a second. What else can we do with this? We have all these products. We need to move into Web3 as well. But without the infrastructure that you're providing and everyone else in this space, that's not possible. So we really appreciate it.
Yeah, and if you look at it, this is like a game, right? The Lego. A Lego blocks is a perfect example of what's happening right now in Web3. Ledgerama is very good into wallets. Us, we're going to be in the naming system. The creators themselves will be creating the objects that's going to be there. And we put all these things together in creating the world, the shared world that we have, and could be interfaced with the other chain worlds. And that's the beauty of it, because Hedera cannot do all the stuff. There are other chains who does very good stuff.
Sure.
So, but we can still interact with them in time, of course, with collaboration, of course, and it's going to come. But this is really a new way of, again, it's a paradigm shift, totally different paradigm shift. And that's why we're excited.
Yeah.
Very great things to come.
We were just talking about how MasterCard had its own blockchain that it was providing services for all kinds of companies. The one that we were actually talking to was Fresh Supply Co., supply chain and payments. And real quick, MasterCard found out our core business is not running a blockchain. So now Fresh Supply Co. is using Hedera. But it's all these little, like you said, all these building blocks that fit together, whether it's our marketplaces with Hash Access and Zeus Market, and then our DeFi platforms with Saucer Swap and with HeliSwap, and our games and our metaverses like Earthlings and Lithos. They all fit together, and you learn how you can actually start to leverage off of each other. And that's one of the things as we're building our company with Twigital that we're looking for. We're like, hey, we can utilize the entire Hedera ecosystem, and everybody is so welcoming and wants to work together. And by helping others, you're also helping yourself. So it's just a great space to be in. And like you said, Lehman and Mance have established kind of that the feeling of the space, like this professional but welcoming and friendly. So like you said, they're just great leaders for our space, because they've really set the tone of the entire space. And I just love to see that feed over into new people that are coming into our space all the time.
Yeah. Another project that caught my eye recently, which they just introduced last week, is HBAR Suite. The way they do the tokenization of NFT in terms of I see DEX, NFT DEX. Can you now you can, that's a new concept altogether. And this is really where those little pieces, and they did it through APIs and all the stuff. So it's another a Lego block that you can interface and put into your whatever project you're doing. And that's why it's so exciting. This is now really, again, going back to Man's World's tokenization of things. And if you understand that, this is Web3.
It's each one of these little building blocks and the little spaces that we're building in. It feels so big. Like, we talk about Twigital or the wallet area or DeFi or NFTs or the marketplaces. gaming, they all feel like when you're working in them, it feels so broad and huge, but it's just one little piece of the broader puzzle. It's gonna be it's gonna be impressive when everything actually comes
Yes.
together, and all these things are gonna be exponential growth curves. And when they take off, it's just gonna be mind blowing.
Well, and not only that, with all these little pieces separately developing on its own, this is like what I call, like car parts. These little car parts being developed, and you can create all these little parts and create a new project again, or create a new service that if you will. It's wonderful. So now it becomes limitless.
It's kind of like the Hedera itself. That's one of the things. Like
Yes.
when I first was thinking about what the HBAR Foundation was doing and all the different verticals that they were going into, whether it was the metaverse and with NFTs and gaming and DeFi and all these things, they seem to be separate, right? Growing apart. But now all that stuff is coming back together, and everybody's working together. Whether it's applying DeFi within games or all
Yes.
that kind of stuff. It's just neat to see everybody then start to work together again. It felt like everything was kind of moving apart last year, but now we're figuring out how it can all work together again.
Yeah, and more importantly, another concept that's very important also is the no code, right? Because now, and the way that we did, especially in Hedera, the way they did it is through APIs and all the stuff, and the developers who's building the projects is also doing APIs. Now these are APIs that you can integrate into your project. And hopefully now in these APIs can be represented by an icon. And now it's an icon, now it becomes now a no code environment.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Shout
you
out to
can
Milan,
call
of course.
Because at that point, it's just the UX. It's just the presentation of things, right? And then if you do that, then there you go. There's your metaverse coming.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys are familiar with HBarVox on Twitter. So
Oh, yeah.
if folks want to reach, folks reach out to @HBarVox on Twitter. That was all built no code.
Yes.
So
yeah.
of course, shout out to Hedera Dev Milan for doing that work.
I love.
He's definitely pioneering the no code stuff in Hedera space.
It's amazing what he can build.
Yes, I love that project. When it first came out, I was one of the very first one who tweeted out "Happy birthday."
Cool. Nice. That's cool. So Somm, I wanted to ask you if you could just one of the major value propositions of Web 2.3, of course, is the bridging of the two worlds, so to speak. Could you just kind of give me the real short version of what are some of the defining characteristics of Web 2 and Web 3, and then how is it that Web 2.3 is actually bridging those? I know there's an organization called ICANN in the Web 2 world. So how is it that Web 2 is, or how is it that Web 2.3 is going to kind of bridge these two worlds together?
Yeah, so if you go back to maybe 2 years in 21 or 2020, if I'm not wrong, so each year of Web3 has got a kind of theme. So 1 year it was DeFi, the other year it was NFTs. People were crazy behind NFTs. Now everything is settling down as we spoke about, like things are falling together. People are having these Lego blocks and working together. But what we think is that even in the far off areas of the globe, people could easily correlate to a Web2 domain. So somebody's out there, they will know, or a person will know what is google.com, for example, or john.com. Each time I keep talking about John. So let's say john.com. So they'll understand what it is. And they could also correlate to a website hosted for john.com or google.com is obviously a global known service. So these Web2 domainers, they have, or maybe they have very little knowledge of Web3. Maybe Ethereum is a huge success story out there because of the ETH explosion last year. And people now, they are trying to explore the Web3 world. And when they come to the Web3 world, starting from Ethereum, obviously, even in Hedera, the wallet addresses are long. So when you have this analogy between the IP addresses and the wallet addresses, again, we needed to have the alphanumerical names or the human readable names to translate those long names, especially in Ethereum, to the normal names like john.eth, for example. So what we are trying to do here is that we think, and which may be true, and we think it's correct, that these Web2 domainers should be allowed to come to the Web3, because if you observe in the Web3, UI UX is a big friction point. It's very difficult for a person or a non-Web3 guy to be onboarded to Web3. As Dell spoke about wallets and all those journeys, he he needs to understand so many things. But if you go and tell him that, look, you have been doing these domains for last so many years, you know all these things, you may be correlated with GoDaddy and other name service providers. So let's come to Web 2.3. This is our intention, that if you have a Web 2 domain, we'll bring them to a place and suddenly we'll nudge them to the Web 3 interface. So they don't need to think about the Web 3 in that very complex nature, or it is very cumbersome to do new things in Web3, especially when you talk about the ownership and the wallets kind of stuff. But just bring in the Web2 domainers and suddenly open the window of Web3. So what we're trying to do here is that we are trying to bring in the Web2 domains from 3 different parallel processes. One is the Web2 guys who have never heard of Web3, bring them to the Web2 interface, a single simple management application, a DApp if you would like to say, and they can manage the Web2 domains of GoDaddy, Namecheap to start off, and then suddenly they'll be allowed to take care of the domains in HBAR or the different project TLEs which we have minted together. That's one way of reading it or trying to address it. The second way is that we are all Hedera guys. So let's say within the community, we have all minted HBAR names and other different project TLEs. And each one of us will have at some point of the day, or even we have today, some of the Web2 domains. So it's very complex to jump from one platform, let's say HBAR thing, to GoDaddy, for example. So there also we are trying to bring in the Web3 guys or the entire community of Hedera from Web3 to the Web2. So that's like a kind of bridge. And then there is this third person who is like, he's like a hybrid guy. He's into Web2 and he's into Web3. So we have taken the domains to be a perfect path. You can treat it as a road or a path and bring the Web2 guys to the Web3. So suddenly the whole new way and large amount of people and many people from across the globe, they all be coming to Web3, especially to Hedera. This is what we're trying to do. Merge the Web2 domains and Web3 domains together from the single interface, allow them to manage, administer, buy, mint, book domains in both the worlds. That's where we have started doing that. Yeah.
Wow, that's a tall order. A lot of work.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So you've mentioned in the past, you've mentioned some collaborations with other name service providers and other teams in the Hedera ecosystem. How are that going?
Yeah, so we have worked, we started with Hashgraph.name, so it was great. We have been working together. So HBAR is the native token or the TLE, which is being managed by both of us, Web23 and Hashgraph.name. And now we have this Kabuto name service. They are also acting and giving and bringing a lot of value proposition to the Hedera community. So together again, we are marching to a point where the domain. So the first intention of all of us is to avoid the duplicacy of the names. Like we had some initial trouble, but we have figured it out to avoid the duplications. So KNS, Hashgraph.name and Web23, we are all working together to avoid that duplicacy. And then if you have observed, all these projects also want to have their own identities and their own project, like we minted Hungry and all those other projects. So we would allow these projects, obviously we are figuring out a process to allow these new projects to own their own TLD. So we would be following the process collaboratively and together and allow the projects, the older projects or the newer projects within Hedera to mint off their own TLDs. So it's a great working together with the teams and within the community. Yeah.
And Dell, are there, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, there was something I read on your website about the potential of consumers being able to monetize their content. I wonder how that works really.
That may come when the smart pages functionality part of our product line will come out. So it's there in the process. We just can't mention the timeline as of now, but that's definitely one of them. And another way that we're thinking to, me coming from the old world, right, from the domain names, and they haven't really done this before in the old world, right, on the Web 2, but actually the Web 3 is further along on this concept, is what we call making it as a domain as a service. What is a domain as a service? It is really like an extension, or an extension of that would be subdomains. You have a root domain where you can sell and offer your subdomains with that. Say, for example, you may have jeremy.hbar. So you may want to offer that to your family members or your friends or whatever. Now 100 people now can take advantage of that domain. And that's another way of monetizing that we feel monetizing the root domain, the digital asset that you have, right? And it could be like for a project, it could be the name of their NFT, say, for example. So you can now provide all these new ways. This has not been done very much, but we feel that that's another way of monetizing it. It's like owning a land and then subdividing it into parcels, if you will. So that's the visualization of it. So we're developing that. It's going to come close. We're working with some members in the community who have thought about this idea actually too. And that's when we found about them. They started talking to us and they said, how can we monetize this? And then we said, okay, fine, that's already in our thoughts. And we just have to finalize things and of course, our relationships with them. But this is again, one of those missions that we see to give value to the community. How do we bring to incentivize them and ability to monetize them too, because that's very important, right? Behind of all this that we're doing is to spread economic activity of some form, right? Because that's the only way. It's a great motivation to do things. And so domain as a service is coming. Right. And that's one. If I answered your question in some form, Tim?
Right. Yeah, and that kind of preempted, and that kind of nicely preempted my next question, which was, I just was going to ask you to talk about some of the differentiating factors of Web2.3. You know, as you're working within the space, you know, and collaborating with other people in the name service space. Of course, you know, generally it's important to find some kind of problem that you're solving uniquely to your company, and that sounds like a good way to do it. So are there plans for cross-chain support? So we talked about .eth. If you could talk just a little bit more about how will that work between, you know, are you talking to folks that are you know, on other layer ones, other DLT platforms, and how is that conversation going?
Yeah, so we have started talking to them, and it's in the very, very early stage, because now we have to have the infrastructure ready for the Hedera, because we think and we are committed to make Hedera as one of the clearing ledgers for all the domains whichever get minted at different layer one chains. So we have just started, and we are just thinking around to make sure that it becomes seamless and frictionless, because they are having different set of structures and metadata at their end, and we are having a different set of, let's say, the wallet naming style. And for example, Ethereum has a long alphanumerical addresses. We have just the numbers. So we are figuring out to make sure that the transition is simple. They talk to each other, they understand each other. And for a specific chain, there has to be a clearing ledger. So for example, it's like the way the normal ICANN domains or the Web2 domains get resolved. So if you want to reach out to john.com, so the .com will say, okay, you go to ns1john.com, because I don't care about that. So it's like decentralization when you want to reach out to the names or the real A addresses, for example, the website addresses. So the same kind of structure will evolve. So for all Hedera specific names, we'll have a joint collaborative clearing ledger. So whether it's .hbar or other project TLEs, will be collectively responsible for resolving those names and even allowing the new names to be minted. And even when you go out to other chains, it's like we'll have a kind of record. So we'll say, okay, these are also the names which have been minted elsewhere. So it's like a kind of cross references which have been done for the last few years. And that will be the starting point for all of us to make the whole experience cross-chain, or let's say chain agnostic. Right.
Building those Lego blocks, one block at a time. Absolutely. Go ahead, Del.
If I may add also, Jeremy, again, because of the name of our mission, right? Web2.3. One of our really challenges and motivations is really to onboard people to our space. because that is really where our focus should be, and not on the chain, because on the chain, they already understand that. And we know everyone is so smart in the Web3 world. So, that's not, that's not to our end, that's not our focus per se, but our focus really on onboarding Web2 and getting them understand what is Web3, right? So we're targeting and communicating to the registrars, to the registries even, right? There's a lot of TLDs out there. We've reached to some of them, and they're very interested. And that's what we're getting. And they're understanding it now, slowly with our communication with them. At first, of course, they're gonna kind of like, that's Web3. We don't want to be there. But in reality, when we start to let them and explain what the Web3 is all about, the premise of Web3, the data ownership, the data immutability, all the properties, and then the fees that Hedera offers in terms of efficiency and cost, then they started to understand. Then they said, "Oh, can we meet with you again?" So we're getting that interest now, and of course, we cannot pursue them and to complete our mission to bring people on board into our ecosystem.
Right. Yeah, I've heard, so in talking to folks that, come from the Web2 space and, just serious data engineers. I mean, you talk to them and, and there's some talk about, well, is Hedera Hashgraph really, is it just a really fancy public message bus for companies to use? And the answer is, in a way, yes, it is. But when you talk to people in these companies and they say, wait, a public message bus with low fees, well, they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on these contracts with company like Oracle. So when you look at something, a cost-effective solution like Hedera Hashgraph that's able of ordering and timestamping these messages in a fair and distributed way and saving these companies potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars on these contracts with the major oracles, suddenly the light turns on. And what kind of became, like you said, Dell, like what becomes a conversation of kind of like, the Web3, suddenly when you kind of start to talk about it in that way, the light bulbs turn on and they start to see the real benefit that that DLTs and layer ones like Hedera can provide.
Jeremy,
sorry.
No, it's fine. That sounded like a very specific conversation that you had, Jeremy. Did you actually have a conversation like that recently?
Yeah, actually, yeah, we did.
Yeah. Okay, but you can't say who yet, huh?
Oh well, no. I mean, So we talked to DevOps, and we talked to different teams from whether they're from IBM or whether they're from Raillink, or we talked to different teams, and they all but essentially they all kind of they understand once they start to see it, they understand the value proposition there. So
sure.
Yeah, one thing also to that we're also targeting are the as Web3 again proposes is the financial inclusion, right? Because there's so many people who doesn't even have any bank in the third world countries, and how do we bring those people into the Web3 world? And this is where again we're targeting the small mom and pop people who wants to engage an e-commerce type of thing. And once we introduce the smart pages that they can use, then we bring in people again for financial inclusion that we all desire.
Awesome. So what are some of the latest major milestones for Web 2.3? What are some of the things that you're most proud of recently, of accomplishing within the past, I don't know, maybe 6 months?
Yeah, so we are on the verge of releasing, as Dell has been talking, it's called Smart Pages. So basically, if you want one lines or one statement explanation of Smart Pages, that it's the Web3 WordPress, or it's a hybrid way to publish your Web2 contents and Web3 contents in the form of a timeline. So for example, if you want to have a JPEG and if you want to publish it, if you are doing it with Facebook, you just go to the smart page of yours, which is hooked back to your, we take your Web3 name, for example, .hbar, and we map it with the Web2 domain, for obviously because the browsers need to reach out to you. And then we have the smart page. So the first post of your smart page or the timeline could be a JPEG photo, let's say a welcome message or the welcome image. And the next post of the timeline could be an NFT, which you could mint right from within the smart page. You take any picture, you do take any photograph or even a video file, audio file, and then you just convert it into NFT. This will also have the integrated bidding engine, auction engine, and will also have the integrated marketplace. So you're going to have all the tools, all from within the smart page. It's like Web23 website. That's what we have termed it as. So, and we are starting this with Hedera, obviously, because it is so easy and allow people to have their own vehicles of monetization. This will just start because Web2 sites or the websites which have been prevalent in the Web2 domains, there are platforms which will charge a lot of money from them. But when you have your own way of representing data sets or the Web2 assets, along with the Web3, it becomes a game changer. So that's what we're trying to do. We are trying to release the smart page, and we have been working on this for the last few months. We are just at the verge of releasing this. Anybody can go there, just if he has a Web3 domain, let's say .hbar, and he just needs to hook it up with the Web2 domain, and boom, he'll start immediately. He needs to do a little bit of configuration, which is obviously required for most of the platforms out there. Configure his profile, even his PFPs could be NFTs, and then his time, and then he can share the Web2 URL along with his friends and families, and even in his social media conversation. And then he can start pushing the Web2 and the Web3 contents in the smart page. So that's something which we have been working for the last few weeks, and we are very excited to have this for the Hedera community.
That's a very cool product. Yeah, I can't wait to see it. That sounds awesome. Yeah, congratulations on that. Great work.
Yeah, so
I think,
yes.
Yeah, we're all looking forward to it. Very cool. So that's great news. Awesome. So we're going to move into the Market Mondays bit, and then we'll kind of circle back. We'll end up with some final words. Tim, if you would, while Brandon's going to do some Market Monday stuff to kind of get us updated on how things are looking in the crazy wild west of cryptocurrency markets, if you could just make sure that there's no questions coming in from the audience, and of course we're going to get ready for my favorite part of the show, where we're going to give away some tokens. Take it away, Brandon, if you would. How are things going in the markets today?
Sure. Well, I think the one word that could describe HBAR is outperformance right now. It's just doing a fantastic job. It's holding on there really well. So just to kind of get into some of the details, when Dell was announced, so that was they announced last Tuesday, we had a really good run up from about 6.8 cents to about 7.9 cents was where we topped out at. Immediately started to drop off from there, but I think it started to catch some people's attention, and they started to do research into the space, and we've held on to a lot of those gains really well. And then on Friday and over the weekend, things got really interesting, and we jumped up almost another penny. But there was some arbitrage things that were going on. It went up to about 8.8 cents, we'll say, on the world markets. And then as far as right now, just to let everybody know, we're sitting at about 8.3 cents. But got up to about 8.8 cents in the world markets. Coinbase specifically started to trade at a premium. And the reason why it started to trade at a premium was because people couldn't deposit to properly arbitrage. And there was certainly some misunderstanding there, I think, because Coinbase is looked upon as one of the leaders. They think that's what should be setting the price. But in general, in the HBAR market, it is not one of the larger markets. Binance is certainly a lot bigger. But I think people were buying on there and was pushing that premium up significantly. We got up to actually going over 10 cents on Coinbase, and because people couldn't properly arbitrage, it was like a 1 penny premium over what we had on the rest of the market. Now, as soon as people could start to arbitrage, that price started to come down. Initially, it started to pull all the other prices up. But I think because all those other markets combined are much larger than Coinbase, eventually it did come down a bit. But we've still acted fairly well. We would have been looking for support, certainly. Resistance we had at 8 cents. Right, and that goes all the way back to when Google was announced as one of the governing council members, all the way back in 2020. And we ramped up and we hit about 8 cents. That was resistance then we came back down. And several times since then, 8 cents has either been support or resistance. Now that we've broken above it, we can look to 8 cents for support, hopefully. And that's kind of what we saw just over the past several hours. It dropped down to about 8 cents, and we've caught a bid since then. And like I said, it's sitting at about 8.3 cents right now. So hopefully that'll continue to act as support in the H-bar market. As I said, we've outperformed. So just comparing H-bar to some of the other coins out there, we have Bitcoin. Over the past 7 days, Bitcoin's down about 6%. Over the past 24 hours, it's down about 2.5%. Ethereum's down about 10% over the past week and down about 5% over the past 24 hours. Compare that to H-bar. We are down about 7% over the past 24 hours. Of course, coming from all that arbitrage stuff that I was talking about before. But over the past 7 days, we're up 19%. And that's really an outlier. I think it's in the top 5 as far as performance over the past 7 days. And out of the mid caps, it's certainly riding fairly high.
Right.
Things that are going on besides that, of course, we had some action taken against Kraken by the SEC for staking rewards. They pretty much just paid the fine and went about their business. But Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase, came out saying, there's not enough clarity and, they shouldn't be regulating through enforcement like that. And his opinion was actually supported by the number 2 person at the SEC, Hester Pierce. She came out with a tweet. She dissented from how they handled things at Kraken. So it's going to be really interesting how that goes forward. Of course, I'm not an expert in those legal matters. So tomorrow for our Twitter space, we're going to be doing a Twitter space at 4 p.m. Eastern, the normal H-Bar Foundation Twitter space. And we were going to do just general DeFi. But because all that stuff is going out, and I think there's a lot of questions around it, we actually are getting George, the general counsel for the H-Bar Foundation, to come on, and he's going to give us some insight into what he thinks around everything that's going on in that regulatory regime. So that's pretty much all I have, unless you guys have any questions.
No, that's great. No, yeah, definitely we'll tune in to the Twitter Spaces tomorrow, 4 p.m. Good to know. Yeah, and so yeah, there are a lot of questions floating around about staking. Of course, staking rewards, are something that's really popular in the Hedera ecosystem. What Kraken was doing was definitely different than what is happening in the H-bar world. So, want people to be aware that there's definitely a big difference between the staking that was being done by Kraken. So don't want people to get too overly concerned about, the nature of the staking and getting staking rewards on Hedera, because they're definitely different animals.
Well, that's one thing that we certainly have to consider is when you're doing staking through a centralized exchange or an intermediary like Coinbase or like Kraken, they're taking their wallet and then they're securing those networks with their wallet, their stake, and then they pass those rewards on to you. That's a lot more complex than you just taking your own wallet and doing native staking on Hedera, where you personally are providing that stake and securing the network. So it is a different animal, but even the SEC can't agree, and even some of the leadership. I mean, Hester Pierce is the number 2 right under Gary Gensler, and she dissented against how that was handled. So I can't imagine her remaining there. Unless she's going to get on board, or the other way around, right? I can't imagine that kind of dissent and Gary Gensler either being okay with Hester Pierce going out publicly and disagreeing, or the other way around. So I'm not sure what's going to happen there, but I know I've been in leadership positions in business in my life, and I can't imagine, your number 2 coming out and dissenting like that, and it's standing. So it's going to be entertaining to watch. But of course, there's a lot on the line here.
Yeah, and it definitely highlights a lot of the lack of clarity that we're experiencing here in the U.S. I mean, that really just kind of puts a microscope, really kind of amplifies and puts a microscope on the magnifying glass, so to speak. When you've got the 1 and 2 seed in the SEC disagreeing on how things are proceeding, it just. Oh boy, yeah, like you said, exciting times.
Well, staking, of course, proof of stake methodology is half of the Hedera secret sauce that makes us so energy efficient. Of course, the algorithm itself and how it works allows us to become 2 orders of magnitude more efficient than a lot of the other proof of stake networks out there. But if we didn't have proof of stake in general, and you're using proof of work, you'd be 2, 3, 4, 5 orders of magnitude worse off. off. So proof of stake in itself is really important to make sure that this technology is efficient and has a future.
Right. And as far as the market aspect goes, of course, none of this is investment advice. We're people sharing our educated opinions on YouTube. Please take it for entertainment and educational purposes only. But I can definitely say that over the past couple of weeks, you know, as I'm hunting around and searching for things on YouTube, you know, examples of what people are doing and what other influencers are up to, I'm seeing a lot more mention of HBAR and Hedera. I mean, it's just the flood is, you know, it seems like the floodgates are kind of opening up. I know we had BitBoy, Ben Armstrong, the BitBoy Crypto has done some really nice. We had an interview with Lehman Baird. If people watch his kind of portfolio management episodes, he had a nice little episode where he was, you know, adding accumulating HBAR and adding holdings there. So you know, you're definitely seeing an uptick in the influencer space, which I think is, you know, which is a positive sign.
Well, everything's kind of coming together, right? We've had Atmaio come online, and they're providing 500 transactions, 550, 600 transactions per second on a consistent basis. So that's one thing that fits into our narrative. We have a Fortune 34 come into the council with Dell. We have, you know, the entire ecosystem building out and how efficient we are with everything else. It's just kind of all coming together, and you know, all the building that's going on with infrastructure like Web23 and Walla Wallet and Blade Labs and everybody else. I mean, it's all just kind of coming together. So when people do catch notice because Dell came out or because the price is going up or anything along those lines, there's a really deep rabbit hole for them to be able to dig into and sink their teeth into and be like, hey, there might be some real value here. What are other platforms doing? And how does that look that they might be invested in? How does that compare to what's being built in the Hedera ecosystem? And I think we stack up pretty well.
Right. Yeah. And people, you know, people ask, you know, and Dell, I'm sure, you know, and Dell and Somm, you guys have got, I'm sure you've heard this before too. Really all of us, you know, is like, wow, you know, why do you continue to, I mean, it's something we always ask, why are you building on Hedera, right? Why Hedera? And I think for a while we've all known like that it's going to come to a point where you just can't ignore Hedera anymore, you know? And so it seems like we're getting closer and closer to that point. Like you mentioned, we may have been, you know, we may have turned that corner where, you know, you can't ignore it anymore. If you're in the Web3 space at all, you know, you can't continually turn a blind eye, especially when there's so much going on.
Yeah.
And I wager if this trend continues, which I believe I have faith that it will continue, this year we're going to see probably HBAR in the top 10.
This year, that would be amazing. But I mean, the question is, you know, now we have Atmaio online. What does it look like, and how's the confirmation look if we get another really big use case? Coupon Bureau coming online and doing hundreds of transactions or thousands of transactions per second, or, you know, Lithos goes online and starts to really utilize. Now, of course, that's going to be a couple years down the line, but these things are going to come. Fresh Supply Company comes online and really starts to do some significant transactions. That's the next step that I think is going to be really important, is not to be just a one-hit wonder. Of course, we have tons of small applications that are doing, you know, a few transactions per second or a few transactions per minute. But what happens when we have another one of those big enterprise use cases that's doing hundreds or thousands of transactions per second? How that impacts the narrative as well.
Right.
If you notice, I noticed that the transaction count in Hedera transactions.com site, I checked yesterday, we're almost 4 billion now. Or it hasn't crossed yet, right? And how far along did we go? It was just recent, the 3 billion that we crossed.
It was
4 billion.
Dell, that's a perfect point. It was 8 months until we got our first billion transactions.
Correct,
now,
right.
You know, chugging along like we are right now, we'll be doing more than 1 billion transactions every month. So these crossing 1 billion is no longer going to be a milestone, right? Because it's going to be coming so fast, and especially if we get, you know, things ramping up even further, it's going to be fun to watch for sure.
Yeah, and that someone who's doing the project, the 1 centers. I would like to see the 1 centers. Now we've gone through the 5 centers, and then hopefully the 10 centers coming up. I'm looking forward to that. So that will be really historical when that happens.
I'm not sure, Dell, if you knew, I am the 1 center. We're the ones who do it. We've got the
Oh wow,
Oh yeah. I'm not sure.
bad.
I'm not sure how we're gonna give them out and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, we have
Well,
100 of those NFTs, and they're ready to go whenever.
with the recent dip, I'm sure a lot of community members are 5 cents. So better get one, and
That's
then
right.
10 cents
That's
are
right.
script soon.
That's cool.
All right.
It's so fun to it's really fun to kind of be at the earliest days of this. It's the bleeding. We're at the cutting edge, right? When you're at the cutting edge, you're probably going to bleed a little bit. I mean, it's been it hasn't necessarily been an easy road, but I think I think the rewards, I think the risk will definitely the rewards will definitely be worth the risk in the long run. So Tim, have we got a Twitter winner? So my favorite part of the show is where we give away 10,000 jam tokens. We do this every week. Many thanks to Andrew Antar. We had him on last week to talk about Tune.fm and all the awesome things that they're doing with music NFTs and Jamverse. We're gonna have Andrew back on a little bit. I had a few more questions that I wanted to ask him. But a lot of appreciation for the Tune.fm team, one of our earliest partners and good friends over there at Tune.fm with the 10,000 jam tokens. So Tim, who's it going to go to this week?
Yeah, before I make the announcement, I've got to say there is a lot of cheerleading in the comment section to the Web23 team. Guys, love you. I think it's the reciprocation of the energy and the passion that you guys have clearly demonstrated. And our winner will be Akmal Bad, at Akmal Bad, Akmal. So we'll be reaching out to you, Akmal. So stay tuned and congratulations.
Awesome. Love to see another 10,000 jam token winner. And I mention this every week that it's my favorite part of the show because I love being able to get these tokens into the hands of people. It's just anybody out there in our Twitter family. And if they don't have any tokens, from the Hedera token service, this is just a great way for them to not only participate in Tune.fm and the cool things that are happening with streaming music over there, but just to see how fast and how efficient these transactions are. I mean, once you start playing around with these tokens, and you just see how lightning fast and cheap it is, I think that's one of the things that people can get really excited about. I mean, basically it's, near instantaneous. I mean, these transactions just happen so lightning fast. So thanks for the announcement there, Tim. Glad to see that there's some folks in the YouTube audience participating and showing their appreciation and support for the Web23 team. So as a last few words, Somm and Dell, if you've got some things that you'd like to pass on to the community, what's the best way for them to keep up with Web23? How can they interact? How can they pick up some of these domain name NFTs? What are some things that you'd like to leave with the audience before we sign off?
Yeah, I'll start off. Well, we are in the Discord and our Twitter handle, web23.io. And we're looking forward to working with the community and all the projects out there. That we are a very collaborative group. We are open to listen, to really create this opportunity that we have, to make the ecosystem that we have, to bring on board people from Web2. So we are, this is not our journey. This is everybody's journey. We understand that we are in the infrastructure part of things. That's why there's no other way but to collaborate with people. And expect some more communications from us. I know we've been quiet. We've been really grinding on the background, but we're bringing in, folks from the community to help us now spread a word and be active, and we're ready to engage.
Very cool. And Somm, if people want to pick up one of the Web23 domain NFTs, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so this is available at app.web23.io, so people can come and mint off their favorite .hbar names. And if they want to have, we also have the projects listed out there. So there are a couple of projects with whom we have minted the top level domains within Hedera, so they can come and mint off their own favorite names with those project TLDs also. Yeah.
Very cool. All right. So that brings us basically to the top of the show here, the top of the hour and the end of the show. I want to thank everybody out in the YouTube audience for being here. This has been an awesome live streaming episode of Alternative Money Mondays. Dell and Somm, Web23 guys, I can't thank you enough for being here. Of course, I'm JR, co-founder of Ledgerama, makers of Walla Wallet, the original, the trusted, and the safest mobile wallet in the Hedera ecosystem. Our community manager, Tim Mungai, thank you for all your hard work, man. I can't thank you enough. Brandon, my favorite influencer, Man, you're always, every week you showing up and that smiling face. You got the Batty Hattie t-shirt on there. So representing the community and the NFTs out there in the community space. Really cool, really cool project there, doing some cool stuff. So thanks again, everybody. We're going to be signing off, but we'll see you again next Monday for Alternative